Howdy. We're back to Ruben Snake in Chapter 7. Sorry for the delay. I had some chores around the house, and as some of you know, Indigenous Literature and my Bruce Lee in American Literature classes have been canceled, and we'll talk about the war on humanities and the war on the culture of those of us who come from a darker side of town, so to speak. But for now, let's enjoy ourselves and get back into the story of Ruben Snake and, as he says, your humble serpant, as told to Jay Fikes. And he always starts the chapter with a couple of sayings. And I love this writing style. And in my peyote book, I also take a first-person style, telling stories of social cultural importance. Being Indian is beautiful. Being Indian is feeling Grey Wolf, Thunder Chief, Smoke Walker are more beautiful names than Smith, Jones, Brown, or Johnson. Being Indian is having over 800,000 brothers and sisters. Marriage and family life. Everything I've described up to this point in my life has to do with my own personal life, the way that I grew up. Of course, I didn't mention a lot of things. I had a lot of good fortune to have a grandfather, my mother's father, for the first 13 years of my life. He had a powerful influence on my life, positive influence. And then my own beloved grandmother, my father's mother, was a very important person in my life. My parents also had a beneficial influence on me. They all tried to teach me things. They all tried to teach me what it was to be a Winnebago man. How I was supposed to think, act as a man in our tribe. So I had those messages from my grandfather and grandmother and my parents and my uncles. Yet, I hadn't actually ever applied that understanding to my life. Much before I returned to the Winnebago Reservation in the early fall of 1960 and became reacquainted with Catherine McKee, the young lady I had met in Cleveland. After visiting with her almost every day, it occurred to me that it was time for me to think about changing my life. I began thinking about becoming more responsible and maybe having my own family. I was 23 years old when I proposed to her. I told her that I had come to love her very dearly, that she meant very much to me. I asked her if she would be my wife. So this was the second hill of my life that I began to journey on when I asked her to be my wife, and we started our life together. I tried to recall what my grandfather had told me, that a Winnebago man must be responsible and must provide for his wife. I went to work on the reservation for a local white farmer. At the time, many farm families were leaving their farms and selling their acreage. This white man was accumulating a lot of land and expanding his farming business. So my Menominee brothers and I began working for him for $10 a day. We worked from 7 in the morning until maybe 6 o'clock in the evening for $10 a day, 6 days a week. But I felt very strongly that it was my responsibility to house, clothe, and provide for my wife. This is the way we started our life together. Kathy had been married previously. As I said, and she had a little girl. I told her that this little girl was going to be my daughter, and I promised to love and cherish her. So we started out our family. Life was that way here on this reservation. In the beginning, we lived with my grandmother. Then we stayed with one of my aunts. Then we stayed with Kathy's aunt. It was a real challenge to find our own place to live. There wasn't any public housing available at that time. Most of the housing on the reservation was substandard and just plain inadequate. My mother became aware of our difficulties one day. She talked to my older brother and me. She was also a younger married person. He was also a younger married person. My mother said, "Well, let's go to Omaha. The three of us can go down there and each of us will try to find a job. That way we can improve our life. We'll all get our own place and then you can move your families to Omaha." That sounded like a sensible plan, so my brother and I went with my mother to Omaha and rented a small apartment. Then my brother and I began seeking jobs. My mother went out too, and soon she had a job in a nursing home. Next, my brother got a job as a welder in a manufacturing plant. But I was still going down to the slave market, doing different work each day. Eventually, my brother's boss observed, "Well, you're a pretty good worker. Do you have any more friends or relatives that can work like you do? If so, bring them around." So my brother told me to report to the plant where he was working. Then I applied for a job there and I was hired. That was the beginning of my family life in Omaha. We came back to the reservation, got our families, and moved them down to Omaha. We each rented our own separate apartment and settled down to a life in the city. It was interesting work. We worked in the store fixture manufacturing plant. I tried to demonstrate that I was a good worker, and I set many production standards for the company. I was making suggestions to the plant manager on how to change operations to improve efficiency and improve production. I advised them how to redesign some of the tools and dies in order to eliminate various steps in the manufacturing process. The plant manager was quite favorably impressed with that. He encouraged me to go to school and get an engineering degree so I could move higher up the ladder in this company. So that's what I did. I enrolled at the University of Omaha and started night courses in mechanical engineering. Kathy and I began having children. It seemed like once every year we became parents again. Over a period of several years, we were blessed with 4 daughters and 2 sons. Having to provide for all these children and my wife increased my responsibility and made me feel it was really necessary to get an education and get into a profession that could sustain my family. That is why I began pursuing a degree in mechanical engineering. The company that I worked for had agreed to help pay for my schooling. Depending on my grade level, they would provide 50, 75, or 100% of my tuition. I came back to the reservation and went to the Bureau of Indian Affairs and asked for some scholarship assistance. I informed them I'm trying to go to college and I don't have enough money to see me through. It astonished me that this Bureau of Indian Affairs office, representing 3 different tribes here in Nebraska, was supporting only 10 individuals to go to college. They had plenty of money for vocational technical training. They had money for galore to send people to become nurses or plumbers or welders or auto mechanics or cosmetologists, but they didn't have any money for us to attend college. They lacked the foresight to see that Indians needed to have college degrees. So after pleading my case, I was given $180 from the Bureau of Indian Affairs to start college. It was barely enough to buy a slide rule and my textbooks. I was eligible for GI benefits, but for some reason or other, I just didn't use them. I had utilized my GI Bill the year I attended Northwestern Junior College, but I didn't follow through with the GI Bill when I was working for this company in Omaha. After I got started, I began to get some decent grades. The company started paying for my education. I decided that I really didn't need any more support from anybody once my company began paying for my education. I was taking 3 courses per semester at night school and working the day at my regular job. That was my routine for a couple of years, but I still hadn't totally quit drinking. Even though I was working 5-6 days a week and going to school at night, there were still times when I would go out on a weekend binge. I really wasn't committed to my own spiritual ways. I wasn't attending Native American church on any regular basis. I only came back to the Native American church when there was a death in the family or some serious situation. Then I would take a little time out to sit and pray and use medicine. Otherwise, I had forgotten that part of my life. My wife's people My in-laws had been drawn into the Mormon church. Through that connection, we were proselytized quite heavy by the young Mormon missionaries, both on the reservation and in Omaha. I never paid attention to the missionaries when they came around. I'd always just tell my wife to talk to them, and I'd go upstairs and lie down and read. That went on for several years until one day in 1965, a rather heavy weekend drinking binge, my wife told me, "You better think about sobering up and leaving the alcohol alone." That particular time, I'd gotten into a fight one weekend. My older brothers were town marshals on the reservation, and they had me thrown in jail for my own safety. When they let me out, I went back to my family. My two oldest daughters were crying and pleading, "Daddy, please don't drink anymore. We don't like to see you looking this way." I had a fat lip and a black eye as a result of the drunken brawl. It touched my heart to hear my children crying, so I took my wife's words to heart. I told her, "Well, I'm going to put this drinking aside and do something else with my free time." It was in 1965. I was working from 6:30 in the morning until 3 in the afternoon. Then I would go to school from 6 o'clock until 9 o'clock or 9:30 at night. Then our third daughter was born. She was a sickly little girl. She had bronchitis and other health problems, which caused our medical bills to escalate. I couldn't keep on going to school. I had to find some other source of income to pay for my daughter's medical expenses. I quit school and got a second job in order to make enough money to care for my little girl's health. I was working 16 to 18 hours a day there for a while. We didn't even think about having a doctor's meeting for her. I wasn't paying attention to the Native American church at the time. We had gotten involved with the Mormon church, and so it never crossed my mind that my children could be taken care of in the Native American church. I did have my children named in the Native American church when they were all very young. That was about the extent of it. My wife and I sponsored a prayer meeting and asked my brother to christen our 4 youngest children. That's how they got their Winnebago names. Other than that, I only came back to the church when something serious was happening. I became very involved for a brief while with the Mormons. After I stopped drinking and was looking for something else to do, I started associating with these young Mormon missionaries. They asked me to play on an Indian basketball team they were organizing. They soon found out I knew more about basketball than they did, so they asked me to be the coach. I gradually began running all the youth activities for the Lamanite branch, the all-Indian branch of the Mormon Church. I became the director of all the youth activities for them in Omaha. I organized several basketball teams. I had a large group of boys organized that I used to take to the boys' club. I used to take a different group down to the YMCA for swimming. I was constantly on the go. When I got involved in all that, it was to overcome whatever temptation I might have for falling back into my drinking ways. I completely immersed myself in all this youth activity. It was really gratifying because those Indian children from the streets of Omaha were getting into drug abuse and alcohol abuse. It was a great challenge to get out there and try to do something with them, to keep them away from the drugs and the alcohol. Coaching all these teams and organizing these recreational activities and running all these youth programs for the Indian branch of the Mormon Church was enjoyable, but it was an expensive undertaking. I remember going about 6 or 7 cars within 2 years. I was in the habit of hauling kids every evening to the boys' club or going to the basketball or down to the YMCA. I'd have maybe a dozen kids crammed in my station wagon at one time. I would make 2 or 3 trips like that. Those cars didn't last too long. The Mormons never paid me anything. It was all voluntary on my part. In the summer of 1966, I took a job with the Greater Omaha Community Action Council. Even though I was still working my regular job, Greater Omaha Community Action hired me to be the youth street worker. My hours were from 6 in the evening to midnight. I was trying to keep the kids off the street. I got paid for that. It wasn't very much. It was enough to keep gas in my car and keep things moving, but it was a very educational experience for me. I was called upon to use all my organizational skills, which were very limited at the time, by associating with the black community leaders and watching how they did things. I began to learn how to do things. I learned how to make the system react positively to our needs and honed my organizational skills in the process of getting access to the Boys Club, the YMCA, the Community Action Agency, and other social service programs. I learned how to talk to people and get something done for Indian children. This was very important in my future work. After I had been involved in youth work for a couple of years, I had got to know an outstanding gentleman by the name of Eugene Crawford. Eugene was a Sioux Indian, originally from a reservation in South Dakota. He was what they called a visiting teacher, which was a glorified name for a truant officer in the Omaha public school system. One time, when he was visiting with me, he said, "Hey, Snake, we ought to get organized. We ought to create our own Indian Center here in the city of Omaha to meet all the needs of our people. There are several thousand Indians living here, but Omaha has no real Indian organization." I told Gene, yes, that sounds like a worthwhile endeavor. So we set about trying to organize the community to draft some bylaws and articles of incorporation and create an Indian Center. We were aware that groups of Indians in other cities such as Chicago, San Francisco, and Los Angeles had created Indian centers. So we asked some people who had lived in the Chicago and Los Angeles, how did the Indian Center operate where you lived before? We gathered information wherever we could find it. We drafted articles of incorporation and some bylaws, and eventually an Indian Center was created. And it still exists today. The foundation for the center was laid by Mr. Crawford and me. The other people carried on the work later. One day, our two oldest girls came home from school, and the oldest one started, "Daddy, the teacher said something today. She said that Indians have weird beliefs." "What was she talking about, Daddy?" It dawned on my wife that me that we had been shortchanging our children. We had been teaching them what we knew. My wife was one of those individuals who grew up the traditional way of our people. She was very fluent in the Winnebago language, and she had grown up around the Medicine Lodge Society. Her elders and her family had taught her all they knew about this Winnebago life, but we had just never taken the time to tell our children about any of this. So when our daughter came home with this question, "How come the teacher said that Indians have weird beliefs?" we were unprepared to give an answer. We discussed it and agreed that we should be trying to teach our children what Winnebagos really believe in and how they live their life. So we were thinking about that issue when my brother and my older brother called me up and reported, "There's a great things happening here on the reservation. The war on poverty has arrived on our reservation. There's an Office of Economic Opportunity setting up programs here. They're setting up a Department of Labor to work programs and Head Start programs and establishing these kinds of things. We need some help. We need some young people to be here to develop and operate these programs. I'm having a hard time." At that particular time, my brother was one of the youngest members of the tribal council, and he said, "Why don't you consider moving back to our reservation and helping us out?" And that is the end of Chapter 7. Chapter 8 is cultural revitalization and political activism. Seems like a great topic nowadays. I hope you enjoyed that. I'll get Chapter 8 up fairly frequently. Again, apologies on all the home improvement I had to accomplish in the last few weeks, and also the sad news of the war on America's universities. And it's been expressed to me by a lot of elders and a lot of my nieces and nephews and friends. in the Native American church that they'd like me to teach and continue to teach here on YouTube free and with open access, so that there's a better understanding of how Indigenous people have not only contributed to the United States of America in this country, but are absolutely foundational in the principles of art, democracy, the law, as well as understanding that there is a literature of place and space that is only occupied with an understanding of Indigenous literature. So, I've agreed to teach probably one of the most complicated books of Native American literature, but I'll do it in compendium with old lectures that I designed a long time ago and turned into a book, as you all well know, but it is only being published in Estonia so far. But we'll see what we can do now that I'm set free. This is The Peyote Religion by Omar Stewart. We'll be covering this very shortly. And it has everything to do with this small green succulent known as the holy peyote, with hundreds of other names. And I'll be introducing you to the literature of this holy medicine and the Native American Church in the next few classes as well. And a lot of that's through, again, the stories of Ruben Snake. And so I sure do wish you all well and swell, and I'll see if I can use a trick that I learned a long time ago. I must have been 3 or 4, but you know, in the we love mirrors. You can see a lot with mirrors, and so I see my Cheyenne nephew down New Mexico way. Hello to you, Chad, this Sunday. I see Uncle Earl up in Rocky Boy, and Auntie up there too. I hope the skies are blue and not too hot, not too cool, just golden for the rule. I see that's all my special slaxed and nieces, nephews, brothers and sisters in relation that way down Keller Way from Colville, Confederated Tribes. And this is one of my favorite trading posts, because I needed a clean t-shirt for the most as well. But we'll also be doing a tribute to one of the most famous people who's also covered in this book. I think we'll start there with a tribute to Sonny George and his influence on Americana. And that'll be coming up shortly as well. So I hope you enjoyed Chapter 7. Happy Sunday and the fun day. And I'll be shouting out to a few of you from the Magic Mirror as well. We'll carry on that tradition and enjoy the day.